This is EmmaLee Highnote, and she has lived in Cave Spring for all of her life, and she lives on Love Street. What was Cave Spring like when you were young?
Cave Spring was a wonderful, wonderful place, and of course it still is. But when I think about growing up in Cave Spring and the freedom we had and how much we just enjoyed being able to, a whole group of us would get up and we'd go up on the mill race and we would cook breakfast. Just a group of girls, and oh, it was so much fun. And then we would go to the store and buy a watermelon, and you could get a right nice sized watermelon for 10 cents. And we'd go over to the spring and put it in the water and let it cool while we played games and climbed the mountain and had all those good fun things. And then we cut that watermelon. We had a wonderful time growing up in Cave Spring. Everybody knew everybody else, and as I say, we had a lot more freedom now than the children today can have.
What would you, if Cave Spring needed, if it needs any improvements, what would you change about it?
What would I change about Cave Spring? One thing that I really love about Cave Spring is the fact that we have preserved our past. There's so much history in this little town, and I would hope to think in the future we would continue to emphasize that. I think that is what has made Cave Spring so unique, is the fact that we have built on our past. We have remembered these people who came in and our leaders in the town in the past who have really worked to keep Cave Spring to preserve the history of Cave Spring and to keep all this natural splendor that we have. You won't find many parks or little towns in Cave Spring that you can go back and see buildings that are over 100 years old, and so many of our parks have been commercialized. And I think the people, our leaders in the past, have kept it from becoming commercialized. It could very easily have been because of our wonderful water. But it's just been a wonderful place to live. And I would like to see the people working together to keep what we have. It's great.
What was the school like when you were going?
Quite different than it is today. Of course, we didn't have the TVs and all of the wonderful things that you have now. All our writing and work had to be on chalkboards. Cave Spring was a complete school from first grade up to through high school. I was fortunate enough to live across the street almost from the school, and a little house that's still there across the road. And they permitted the children who lived in town and could walk to go home for lunch. Wasn't that great? And the teachers knew, and I'm sure they still know, all the children in this wonderful school we have now. But we were a larger school then, but the teachers knew us, the principal knew every child by name and where everybody lived.
Would you bring the high school back?
It would be wonderful to have the high school back, but I would want us to have very high goals in making it as good a high school as we have a elementary school now. We would have to keep our goals very high, our standards high, and then I'd want that high school back.
What was your life at home?
Well, my father died when I was little, and my mother taught school. She taught at the Georgia School for the Deaf, and there were 4 of us children, we were so fortunate to be able to have someone, a very good person to come in and my little brother, of course, was not in school when I was in, at the time, he was the baby, and she would keep him and cook out dinner for us to go home in the middle of the day and have dinner. And of course, in my home, everybody had chores to do, and because my mother worked, and especially on weekends, we each had our own chores to do, and we had to do those before we could do anything else. But one thing I remember so well, you called last night, and I started thinking about, I think everybody knows about Chick-fil-A, and about Mr. Cathy, who started Chick-fil-A, and his sister, his older sister, Esther Cathy, taught here at this school, and she was one of my teachers, and I loved her dearly. But she was such a caring person. All the teachers were, and I'm sure still are. But I remember I had flu one time and was quite sick, and the woman who usually came to stay with us was not able to come, so I was by myself. And Miss Cathy came over to check on me as soon as school was out. And I'll never forget that. And she wrote a history about the Georgia School for the Deaf. And she loved Cave Spring. She was handicapped and was crippled. And she, in her later years, she was in a wheelchair. But she was just as wonderful a person as Mr. Cathy is.
What were your chores?
Oh, my chores, I always had to wash the dishes. And my sister always dried the dishes. We didn't have a dishwasher. And we washed clothes. We didn't have a washer, and we had to wash clothes by hand. We did not have central heat. We had we had a wonderful heater that heated the whole house. And we had all help to get the wood in, or coal. It was a coal heater. And there were a lot. I'd have to mop the floor too. I had certain portions of the house that I had to keep.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had 2 brothers and 1 sister.
What was your first job?
My first job, I went off to school, to college, and my younger brother became ill, and I had to come home to help. And I got a job. I didn't have my college education, and I got a job as a house parent at the school for the day. And I was supervising girls who were older than I was. But I could communicate with them, and they knew my mother, that they were deaf children. And they had a great deal of respect for people, and I had no problems with them. And then my mother became quite ill, and because I could communicate, I had a deaf aunt in my family. And they asked me to come and take her class, because at that time, teachers did not have any kinds of sick leave. And she would have lost her salary while she was sick. She was out a couple of months. And they asked me to come in and teach the class. And that way I could save her salary, which was important. It was during the Depression. And that was she was the only breadwinner in the house. She had to make the money, so that was a great deal of help. And that was the door that opened to get me in to become a teacher, because I loved it. And I could teach the classes in the morning and then rush down and be there for the children when they came in. So I kept my job as a house parent. And from then on, I started teaching. I was asked to come in and teach. And I got my college education, summer schools, and correspondence courses and night classes, and that's the way I got my college education. I finally took 1 year off to get my master's.
Did you get married?
Yes. Married during World War II, and it was very, the way it worked out was, I thought, very interesting. My mother and dad married during World War I, and they married here in Cave Spring. And they married in the house where the Davises live, up on River Street. That was where my grandparents were living at that time. And then when World War II came about, my uncle and his family were living in the same house. And so my husband and I married in the same house, in the same room, in the same spot that my mother and dad married in. Wasn't that strange that it worked that way?
Did you have any children?
I have 2 girls.
What was your most memorable moment?
About what, the children?
What happened in your life? What was your most memorable
Oh,
moment?
I can't pick out just one, because I have been blessed, and I've had some wonderful things to happen. And I really can't pick out just one. I guess if I had to pick, if you pin me down, I guess I'd have to say my children, the birth of my 2 girls.
Does anybody have any questions?
I'd like to share something with you. You asked some questions about Cave Spring. Back in 1930s, I guess it was 1930, we had a Methodist minister and his wife who were here at that time, and his wife was blind. Her name was Vivian Dean, and she was a wonderful musician. She could just play the piano, and she wrote music. And they came to Cave Spring, and they loved it, just like everybody else does who comes. And this blind lady wrote a poem about Cave Spring, and it's short. And I just this is what Cave Spring is to me. Cave Spring is like a howdy-do that meets you in the street and says, "I'd like to chat with you. Pray rest your way-worn feet." Cave Spring is like an afterglow, and when its day is done, you think of folks you used to know who still reflect the sun. Cave Spring will linger in your heart in such a kindly way. Her memories can now depart. God made her just that way. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. You did. Copy of that. Isn't it wonderful? It was a published poem. It was wonderful. What's her name? Alice and Jillian, I hope I didn't go over.
You didn't really go long enough. You know, when you came to talk to us about the history of Cave Spring,